Welcome back into Mining Stock Daily, everybody. We are getting a corporate update here from Maple Gold Mines. Last week, they published an updated mineral resource estimate for the consolidated Douay-Joutel gold project in Quebec. That includes Joutel's maiden underground mineral resource. Total project indicated resources between those two, that was a 77% increase and indicated to just over 900,000 gold ounces. Total inferred resources comes in with another 70% increase to 4.2 million gold ounces, bringing the collective above that $5 million consolidated gold resource. And back in the day, we used to decide, well, maybe 5 million ounces is that classified tier 1 asset. So we're going to talk about that as well here with CEO Mr. Kiran Patankar. Kiran, congratulations. Good to see you. Last time you and I chatted was back in Frankfurt this past fall. So you've come a long way.
Yes, we have. And the pace of, it's good to see as well, the pace of growth for the company. It's consistent with the vision that we laid out. I'm very pleased that, the resource has certainly been, thus far, it's been well received by the market. But, it's also, we've set out to deliver goals that we outlined to the market when I first took over as CEO, that we really saw the potential for Douay-Joutel to be a potential tier 1 asset in a great jurisdiction. And I think this 2026 MRE really further establishes Douay-Joutel as it's a rare multi-million ounce district scale gold system with further upside, but it's in arguably the best jurisdiction in the world from my standpoint in Quebec's Abitibi. So look forward to getting into it with you, and great to see you again.
Yeah, all right. We can get into the micro here and nitty-gritty detail of what brought this resource to those numbers. But in your mind, what's the single most important takeaway that investors should understand from this update?
Yeah, I think it's that where we were talking about an already low value per ounce for Maple when we were working off of a 2022 resource, which was out of date, which was done at $1,800 gold. We were trading in the circa $30 range. We've grown the ounces at Douay, so obviously the dollar per ounce, it's even more. It's even a more attractive opportunity today. But I think the other thing was we talked about the fact that we weren't getting any value for Joutel in that $30 per ounce valuation on an outdated resource at $1,800 gold. And we weren't getting any value for the exploration blue sky of a 481 square kilometer land package. Well, what we started to show, certainly with this maiden, million ounce resource at almost 4 plus grams per ton at Joutel, is that it's not only is it a real project, right? And we'll walk through the methodology that we use to get to that million ounces, but we're showing consistent step outs, which gives us a pretty good sense that this Joutel deposit can grow. So it's certainly worth something more than zero. I think if you look at it today, we're trading around $26 or $27 per ounce, even after, reflecting the 20% increase we saw in the share price, post announcement. So while the ounces have grown and the share price has performed very well, I think on a relative value basis, we're still trading below the peer group, which I think isn't going to be for long, but still represents a big opportunity right now.
Yeah, you've had a nice move since the resource was announced last week. But now you've got both bulk tonnage open pit at Douay and a high-grade underground ounces at Joutel. How does that dual development profile change the overall project strategy for Maple?
Yeah, I think it's important that, we had this, and we have this lower grade bulk tonnage open pit, pit constrained resource at Douay. Everybody looked at Douay, including our partners at Agnico, as, it's a big footprint, right? It's 6 kilometers by 2 kilometers. It straddles the 55 kilometers of the Casa Berardi break, which we control. It's a productive, gold system. It's about a gram, the open pit material sitting at or near surface. But we were always talking about, the fact that there was more ounces to find. The plumbing system, higher grade potential at Douay was there. We've certainly shown that with some of our step outs, but I think the most important thing with Joutel is it adds a high grade, past producing underground mine complex where we're talking about high grade here, 4 grams plus. If you think about some other projects that have the ability, to take 1 gram open pittable material and potentially blend underground material that's at significantly higher grade to get your overall profile going through a mill to something that's potentially up over two grams per ton. I think both in terms of size, scale, but also in terms of potential profitability and quality of those ounces. I think it's improved our profile significantly, and that's from a blending standpoint. The other thing I would say, and we certainly aren't wedded to one or the other, but if Joutel continues to grow at these grades, at these gold prices, it could also be a very nice standalone project, high grade underground restart opportunity. Which if you could get that up and running, potentially to unlock further value across the land package. What's the one word that we've obviously added with this resource update? It's optionality, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you're pretty confident that Joutel could be a standalone project, not just simply a satellite to Douay.
Well, let me rephrase that. I think Joutel, it was its own standalone project for years, where it operated,
Mm.
was operated by Agnico Eagle from 1974 to 1993. Produced 1 million ounces at 6.5 grams. The cutoff grade was six. I'll repeat that. The cutoff grade at this mine was 6 grams per ton, which means that everything below 6 grams per ton was left behind. Obviously, the gold price in that time when it operated was averaged around $300 per ounce. Today we're substantially up above that, and so it be a standalone. Potentially, I think the 1 million ounces that we've outlined here, those were not based on, I want to reiterate the drilling that we've done since November of 2025, so late last year, all winter. We've been drilling away, the largest drill program in the company's history. None of that drilling, none of that step out success, almost all of that is extensional step out drilling. None of that
Mhm.
drilling is included in this resource. So when we put out a maiden resource on Joutel, it was based off of, effectively found ounces, right? That were there, that were just below cutoff grade, that were left behind by Agnico. And we did mine stope optimization work. We left, reasonable crown pillar. Thought about, thinking about this, from a mineability standpoint. It's a main resource, but we put a lot of rigor into it. So, yeah, I mean, it could be a standalone project, but we're open minded, right, with respect to how
Sure.
these two projects evolve, because I still think there's quite a bit more from the exploration side. I think there's a lot more gold to be found, and that's actually something that I think we can deliver a lot of bang for the buck with our drilling money. Is if we can go and potentially double the size as you tell, with good step out drilling at similar grade, I think that it really does become a potential standalone.
And how do you do that? I mean, is it kind of kind of a dual approach to extending the known zones, or how much confidence do you have in making entirely new discoveries that would add ounces at Joutel?
Well, new discoveries, I mean, we see that potential to add new discoveries across the property. And one of the things that we have done is we talked about this before with your audience. I mean, we've systematically, we've changed Maple, right? This is a different Maple.
Yeah.
This is a new team. We're doing systematic step outs. We're drilling. Obviously, we're getting tremendous support from the capital markets, but we're raising capital efficiently with great supporters, with great people to execute. And when you look at, we released 28 holes out of, 58 that have been drilled to date. There's 30 more holes pending. And you look at where the step outs, for example, at Joutel they were planned purposely, that we didn't want to go anywhere closer to the existing mined out stopes than 100 meters, because we know
Mhm.
we've looked at the variograms on the resource calculation and the exercise we did with SLR. So we know what we need to drill, what spacing we need to drill to add inferred ounces, to add indicated ounces. But we were stepping out importantly along, this is somewhat more predictable stratigraphy than Douay. The mine horizon is this, 3 to 30 meter width kind of subvertical zone, which they called the main iron carbonate horizon. We targeted
Mhm.
that horizon in undrilled and underdrilled areas, which sometimes you sort of wonder, well, why weren't those areas drilled? But then you think about it and go, well, they left everything that was 6 grams per ton behind, right? So when they thought about doing, were there more gold ounces? They didn't walk away from this project in 1993 because they ran out of gold. They found another, they acquired LaRonde. They went on to Goldex and went on to do all the great things that Agnico's done to build one of the leading gold companies in the world. So it's no surprise that there are a lot of untested, undrilled areas that we've applied good methodology to defining both a targeting and a geologic model. We've hit a zone consistently, this main iron carbonate horizon that's delivered similar grades and thicknesses to what was previously mined. And the step outs are getting bigger, right? Because as our confidence increases that we've been able to go 100 or 200 meter minimum step outs from the existing mined out stopes, we're following what we believe are our plunge orientations and controls on higher grade, similar to what we're seeing at Douay as well, that are starting to deliver. Right, it helps us to refine the model, and there's a lot of untested real estate at Joutel.
What about Douay? Where do you see the best opportunity for growth there?
I think Douay's got, first of all, it's got this, as mentioned, it's 6 kilometers out of 55 that we control on a productive break, and the remaining 50-ish really doesn't have any drilling in it. So I think we're gonna start to get after some of the regional exploration along strike from Douay, but I think the real opportunity, we're starting to show depth extensions, right? And this is not
Yeah,
dissimilar from what Agnico was showing at Malartic, with the Odyssey and Goldie discoveries that are now, become the Odyssey project, which adds a lot of mine life to the operations. But it's bulk tonnage underground, right? It's sort of the plumbing
right.
system, and they're obviously looking at that at Detour as well, and going with the Detour underground. I mean, those are two of the largest, producers for Agnico, but two of the largest mine complexes in Canada. And so, we think we've got hallmarks here, both from a geologic and from an operational standpoint, where, Douay could be, maybe the key to unlocking the potential economics on Douay is to say, okay, you've got these open pit, circa 1 gram pittable ounces, but if you can really hone in on, the controls on, the higher grade potential bulk tonnage underground.
Hmm.
I think that opportunity to make a new discovery at Douay, to depth, I think that's really significant for us, because it's not by coincidence that, I'm a geologist as well. And I look at this and say, with that footprint sitting at surface straddling a first order structure that's known to be gold bearing, knowing the hallmarks of other deposits in the Abitibi that are quite comparable, there has to be a system here somewhere, right? And we're seeing evidence throughout the drilling. Some of those holes that we drill, they get pretty exciting. The 338 intercept that we did in 2025, early 2025, which was, 2 grams over 109 meters, including 3 grams over 56 and 5 grams over 17. I mean, you can underground, bulk tonnage underground mine. If you find more of that, you can underground mine that all day, every day at these gold prices. In some cases, with the current drilling at Douay, we found, almost 300 meters of, zero point 0.4 grams, 350 meters of zero point 0.4 grams. While the zero point 0.4 doesn't get you that excited, the fact that we're consistently hitting this gold bearing, hydrothermal system with lots of, sort of similarities to what we're seeing at some of the better holes at Douay, tells us that, we're not far off, right? We're just, right now we're
Right.
vectoring. So I think the goal, for Douay is make that discovery to depth, based on known plunge orientations, and systematically step out. We've extended mineralization on this updated resource. Now at Nika, we're down to almost 750 meters vertical. And I think, this area up to 750 meters, there's still a lot of white space, gaps to fill in, sort of 100 to 200 meter gaps to fill in. But I think, the next step is going to be to establish, we're seeing that plunge orientation repeated at Nika, at Porphyry West, at 531. So consistency gives us the idea and the hope that, we're on to something. And if we can find where those concentrations of gold, may prove up to be economic, over good widths and good thicknesses and decent grade, I think that's a game changer potentially for Douay.
So what is kind of the next step are you thinking? Obviously, you got this updated resource. I mean, in your mind, I think we can have this discussion now. Does 5 million ounces still hold as a tier one type of project or consolidated project if it comes on paper at these gold prices? Because we know a number of ounces are being added just because the price of gold is a lot higher. A lot of companies have been doing updated mineral resources without hardly any exploration or drilling being done. We've seen that for the last year and a half or so. Do you have a tier one project, and how do you advance this forward? You knowing that you still have about 25,000 meters of drilling that you can add ounces with.
Yeah, listen, I like to say, because I like to, under promise and over deliver. I think we have a potential tier one asset. I think that's justified, and in the statement you can back that up with, the quality of the partners we've attracted. We've got Agnico Eagle, obviously, we've got great institutional investors, strategic investors. The market is starting to see that it has that potential. Um, when it comes to tier one and the definition of tier one, I leave it to you and others to kind of decide where and what makes for a tier one asset. But I would say that 5 million ounce plus gold projects in Canada with infrastructure, you can count the junior companies that own those on a single hand. Okay.
Mm.
And so what one can do is start looking at, which companies have those kinds of deposits. What are the relative advantages or disadvantages of established infrastructure, or, being in the middle of nowhere? What are the economic studies? What are the cutoff grades? What are the assumed gold prices, right? And some of the things that we did with this resource, for example, we use a $2,500 gold price. We use a 0.35 cutoff. I think they stack up very favorably against peers who are trading at not only higher dollar per ounce valuations, in the 50s and 60s from Maple, where Maple's trading at 25 or 26, but these are companies that are quite a bit up the cap table as well. They're, $400, $500 million market cap companies have gotten, good recognition in the market. And listen, the reality is, on this tier one question, we're also starting to see M&A happen in the gold sector, because I think the paradigm with the gold price moving as quickly as it has is, it's and obviously the senior company valuations, the cash that's on their balance sheets, it's probably cheaper for them to start buying ounces than it is to go find new ones. And so, when you start thinking about, as an investor, which ones do you want to own, which companies do you want to own, I certainly would want to start with, a potential tier one asset in a great jurisdiction with infrastructure, where there are, majors who are interested, where the valuation is attractive. And I think Maple ticks every one of those boxes. Whether or not it ultimately proves out to be a tier one asset, one of the things that I think is important for us, as I mentioned, that there's, this winter program that we completed, which was fully funded, it's 32,000 meters. But beyond that 32,000 meters, again, that's not included in the updated resource. We've got almost $33 million on our balance sheet, right? And so, unlike companies that have to go out, talk about their resource, and then immediately go and try to raise money, and we were fully funded through the end of 2027. And I expect to see another 75,000 meters drilled. We'll come out with an announcement on where that's actually going to come and what's the budget for that program. But, we're sitting with ample firepower to go and execute, what are going to be ultimately another 100,000 meters potentially of drilling that's not included in this MRE. This MRE was based on 32,000 meters, right? Drilled between 2021 and 2025. So, you can see the pace of activity, the pace of the ability for us as a new team to go out and explore this land package systematically and thoroughly, and really answer the question, which I think we want to know for ourselves. Is this 5, 7, 10, whatever it is? We've got the ability to now go out and run the kind of drill programs that can get us not only answers to potential size, but also we're doing the economic engineering, scoping, and trade-off studies kind of in parallel with that, so that we can also show what the quality of those ounces are, right, from a potential developability standpoint.
All right. Kiran, thanks so much. Good to connect with you. Maple Gold, $220 million Canadian market cap, 70 million shares outstanding. And you can do your napkin math next to your Cinco de Mayo beverage of choice here this afternoon. Kiran, thanks so much for your time. It's really good to connect with you. Congratulations again. Big numbers there, and hopefully we can touch base again later this year.
Look forward to it, and happy Cinco de Mayo. Enjoy those tacos.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Maple Gold Mines trading on the TSX Venture with MGM and on the OTCQX with MGM-LF.
The information presented should not be considered investment advice. Mining Stock Daily and its affiliates are not responsible for any loss arising from any investment decision in connection with the material presented herein. Please do your own research or speak with a licensed financial representative before making any investment decisions.